Alright, so over here in the Maldives, it's not all sunshine and beautiful tropical islands. Sometimes we do get big storms and squally winds, which we really made the most of on our foil camp, winging and downwind foiling a lot, because the conditions were, stormy at times. With the foil, it means it's always fun. And on this session, I was using my 610 by 18 850 code foils S series, and definitely a little bit small for the paddle up on without hand paddles, but I did manage to get a few paddle ups. And just looking at these ones, I wanted to look at what I was doing wrong. And basically, the first couple, I was standing up probably too early and going too straight. On this one, I paddle up, and it's a pretty good bump. I go to jump up, and the bump just runs away, so the bump was moving too fast. I wasn't paddling fast enough. Hand paddles could have helped. This one, paddling a little bit too far back on my board, and just sort of mistimed that one. This looks like a good one here, paddling into it. I should have gotten up on this one, and I just got a little bit toe side as I went to pop up, and the bump went without me. I had to go straight on that one. Paddling into this one, I think this one I do get up, and I'm paddling hard, jump up at the top of the bump, and I go straight, and I continue up onto foil. Notice I don't get up to speed. I'm still tapping the board. With a paddle, I would have been up to speed much earlier. So that pop up was maybe a little bit early, but I need to be at the top of the bump to sort of get going. And notice I'm pumping into the wind much harder. Here's another successful one, paddling in, jumping up to my feet, and a bit of a cleaner one. Preempted that bump nicely, that trough, went down into it and cut across to get the speed, pumping along and going a long way downwind. What we're doing is we're going up to the bow of the boat, then going downwind and paddling back up into this wind. Here's Barry paddling up on a 1150 and an 8.6 axis board. He was doing a pretty good job. Bigger foil certainly made it easier. I then switched to the paddle and had a lot of success, and mainly looking at it, I was paddling up and over bumps. So once I freed the hull from the water, I could then paddle fast enough to get up to speed up and over bumps and then turn side to side. I couldn't do that in the prone because once I got lift off, I was above the water. Obviously, I couldn't use my hands like I can with the paddle. Also, pumping on your knees is much harder than pumping standing up. So that was one of the other things that was hard. And you can also see how much further upwind I can get with the paddle, because you can create that little bit extra squirt of speed and power when there isn't anything else generating it. Here's Barry paddling up. Nice little bump. Plenty of speed, up and foil and cutting across nicely. What we found was that the prone was much harder, basically. I think I had 20 attempts and I got up on 2 of them. On the SUP, I had about 6 attempts and got up on 6. And you can see here, not a very good bump here. I let that one go. And here's a good one here. Waiting, paddling now, paddling hard. And actually pump up and over the bump, up and over the bump, up and over, and then now I'm up and foil. So I'm sort of using 2 bumps. And this is because I'm using too small a foil for the bumps. While it looks very windy, it was a very short fetch. We're inside a reef system, protected from the majority of the bumps on the boat. So while it was windy, the fetch was short. So my 850 was actually too fast for the bumps, and I've certainly found that out on the prone. Paddling up here on this one, you can see I'm up, and I continue to paddle and pump. If I was getting up from my knees, much harder. So basically, I see prone paddling as a really good way to get people into it, and especially with the big foils and the big clean downwind runs, but when the bumps are quite slow. But when you want to start to progress to smaller foils, the conditions really have to match. The advantage of having the paddle is you can get up early, and on foil, you can basically be on 2 smaller foil and still make it work, which means you've got a bigger range, which means if conditions change, you're still going to be able to get up. With the prone, you're generally going to start with a foil that's too big and probably stick with that foil that's too big for a little bit longer than you would on the SUP. So both really good options to get into downwind foiling, and I think prone's a great way to start because you don't have to learn how to stand up or how to use a paddle. Kneeling and paddling with both hands is a pretty easy skill to learn, and the way your arms work and whatnot, it makes you have much better paddle technique without trying to work on it too much. But as I said, the advantage of the paddle is, like I'm doing here, you can paddle upwind, and then you can turn leaning on the paddle, which is another thing that is pretty nice. You can bank it over harder, and you get up to speed much earlier, even on bumps that aren't quite right, on foils that are also too fast for the conditions. So that's my little feedback on prone foiling without hand paddles versus stand-up paddling with a paddle and standing up foiling.